I'd like to begin with a question. Where do you think ethical principles come from? Do they come from divine revelation? Do they come from your personal ability to understand how best to live? Are they arbitrary, to each his own? I invite you to pause the video on the next slide and take a moment to answer the question. I think that most religious people believe that ethical principles come from divine revelation, and that if it were not for divine revelation, ethical principles would be arbitrary. I was raised as a conservative Protestant, and this is what I was taught. Although I continue to cherish my conservative Protestant heritage, I now realize that no religion answers the ultimate questions of human life, including the question of the origin of ethical principles. In my book that is titled, Why, in Pursuit of the Ultimate Answer, I address the fundamental theoretical problems of human life, and I believe, except for a few technical concerns, that I solve these problems. I begin the book by establishing that knowledge is a result of reason applied to experience, where experience encompasses all human experience, including perception, thoughts, imagination, and emotion. I establish that reason applied to experience is the source of all knowledge, including ethical principles, and I go on to develop ethical principles based on this model. We'll see that ethical principles are not arbitrary, because human life does not arbitrarily change from person to person, from culture to culture, or from region to region. Rather, human life is fundamentally the same across all people, all cultures, and all regions, because human anatomy and physiology are fundamentally the same across all people, and because the human need to survive is fundamentally the same across all cultures and all regions. This is the reason for universal ethical principles. In this video, I will show you that ethical principles are based on reason applied to experience, not on divine revelation. And I will do this by providing 3 hypothetical examples. Here's the first example. Suppose that I'm visiting a friend whose name is Tom, and suppose that Tom shows me his new car, which he loves, and he asks if I'd like to drive it to town. I say, sure. So I get into the driver's seat, while Tom gets into the passenger seat. Now suppose that before starting the car, I turn to Tom and I say, hey Tom, I've got a fun idea. Tom lights up and asks what it is. I reply, when I drive to town and come to a traffic light, if the light is green, I'll stop. And if it's red, I'll keep on going. How does that sound? As you can imagine, Tom replies, very funny. Now why don't we get going? I reply, Tom, I'm serious. When I come to a light, if it's green, I'll stop, and if it's red, I'll go. I'm serious. I think it will be fun. Tom looks at me seriously, studying my face, and finally says, Philip, I don't think that your joke is funny. Now, if you'd like to drive, I suggest starting the car so we can get out of here. I reply, oh, come on, Tom. Can't you lighten up and have a little fun? In reply, Tom opens his door, gets out, walks around the car, opens my door, and says that he'd like to drive. I reply, Tom, where's your sense of fun? Let me drive and we'll have some fun. By now, Tom is exasperated, and he bluntly says what he's thinking. I invite you to pause the video on the next slide and take a moment to propose what Tom says. If I were Tom, I would say, Philip, are you crazy? What is notable is that Tom wouldn't say, Philip, it's against the law to go through a red light, and I don't want you driving my car illegally. He wouldn't say that, would he? Similarly, he wouldn't say that I shouldn't go through a red light because God wants us to obey the law in order to follow Paul's injunction in Romans 13. Nor would he say that, since ethical principles are arbitrary, if that's what I want to do, then I'm free to do it. No, Tom would say, Philip, are you crazy? And if I persist in my disposition long enough, he'll eventually begin to think that I must indeed be going crazy. Well, what does it mean to be crazy? It means the same thing as insane. It means that my thinking is so irrational that I won't be able to live a normal, responsible life. So we see that the basis of Tom's judgment about me is not that I might be violating a law or that I might be violating a divine principle, but that I'm thinking in a profoundly irrational manner, in that I'm proposing behavior that is profoundly irrational. In Tom's view, anyone knows that it's absurd to go through red lights because you will disrupt traffic, because you're likely to get in an accident if there's sufficient traffic, and that because you could cause severe injury or even death to yourself or someone else. This is my first example that shows that the basis of ethical principles is reason. Reason applied to experience. Now for my second example. Suppose that I'm giving a talk about a controversial topic in my book, of which there are many. And suppose that a member of the audience challenges me on some point. Say that we enter into an aggressive exchange in which he challenges me and I defend myself. And then I challenge him and he defends himself. And suppose that this goes on for, say, more than 5 minutes, and it's become evident that we're not going to readily resolve our disagreement. So suppose that I open up my briefcase, take out a gun, go over to him, and shoot him. I invite you to pause the video on the next slide and again take a moment to propose what members of the audience will say, and in addition to propose what they will not say. I think it's quite obvious what they will say. They will say that I'm insane. No one will say, "Philip, it's illegal to murder. You'll be arrested and tried for murder." Nor will anyone say, "Philip, you just violated one of the 10 Commandments. God said, 'Thou shalt not kill,' but you just killed someone. So you violated God's law. You committed a sin." Nor will anyone say that ethical principles are arbitrary, so if I decide to kill someone, well, I'm free to do it. Don't you agree that one and only one concern will be going through everyone's mind, namely, that I'm insane, and that because I'm insane, all bets are off what I will next do with the gun. So as a result, everyone in the room is now in serious jeopardy. As in the first example, we have seen that the basis of ethical principles is reason, a reason applied to experience. We take it as common knowledge that it is profoundly irrational to kill someone because of an intellectual disagreement. We take it as common knowledge that this kind of behavior would profoundly disrupt life and would provide no benefit but only harm. We can readily deduce accordingly that the law against murder is based on an ethical principle against murder, and that this principle in turn is based on reason applied to experience. Similarly, we can deduce that an ostensible divine commandment against murder is an expression of acquired wisdom, wisdom that is acquired through the ages as a result of reason applied to experience. In the next part, I'll present the third example.